Good evening. Welcome to the West Haven City Council. We have a 6:30 special meeting called to order. Could we all stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, could you take the roll call, please?
Certainly. So, Councilman Gary Donovan,
Councilman Gary Donovan, Councilman at Large, present.
Councilwoman Colleen O'Connor,
Councilwoman Colleen O'Connor,
at large here, and Councilman Ronald Tagliani is absent at the moment. Councilwoman Bridget Hosky,
here.
Councilwoman Melly Garthwaite,
Councilwoman Melly Garthwaite, Second District, present.
Councilwoman Sarah Akbali,
Councilwoman Sarah Akbarali, 3rd District, present.
Councilwoman Robin Watt Hamilton,
Councilwoman Robin Watt Hamilton, 5th District, present.
Councilwoman Catherine Tucker is absent. Councilman Victor Boris,
Councilman Victor Boris, 8th District, present.
Councilman Robert Bruno,
9th District, present.
Councilman Stephen Johnstone,
Councilman Stephen Johnstone, 10th District, present.
our Chairman Peter Massaro is absent, and our acting Chairman Mitchell Galagnano.
Mitchell Galagnano, 4th District Acting Chair, tonight, July 25th, present.
Okay.
Thank you. Clerk,
I'll read the call.
clerk to the special reading.
West Haven City Council notice agenda of special meeting July 25th, 2022. Notice, in accordance with Rule Number 11 of the Rules Governing the Actions of the City Council, Chairman Massaro has called a special meeting of the West Haven City Council to be held at 6:30 p.m. on Monday, July 25th, 2022, at the 3rd floor City Council Chambers, City Hall.
Thank you, Clerk. I have Doug Coulter here to introduce our special guest who is living in Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, in the grants world, we identify a need, we find a funding source, we make application, we come to you for ratification of that income and expense. This proposal tonight is a little bit different. It's not through any hard work of mine that these funds are coming to us. These funds are coming to us on the very painful experiences of those in our community who have been victims of the opioid crisis. These funds are, a lot of people have worked very hard to be sure that this settlement does not end up like the tobacco settlement, where money was diverted to non-tobacco purposes. The city, through the mayor's efforts and Lee Tiernan's efforts, signed on to a consortium with 34 other towns to have a law firm represent the interests of the towns to make sure we got our fair share of the funds to distribute locally to meet the needs of our citizens here rather than having it a top-down scenario. So the attorneys tonight, Jim Hartley and Charles Hellman, are here to talk about the settlement. They're here to talk about what it means to the city of West Haven, how much money we receive, and how we're allowed to distribute those funds. And I'll turn it over to Attorney Jim Hartley.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to meet you, even if it's over Zoom. I thought the best to start, I have some questions that I was sent earlier, but I think the best way to start is for me to give a general explanation of the settlement because it's quite complex. And then I'll go through the questions. And of course, if you have any other questions or questions at any time, feel free to ask us those questions. This settlement is a settlement among 3 distributors, McKesson, Cardinal, and Amherst Bergen, and 1 manufacturer, Johnson & Johnson. It provides for the payment nationwide of $26 billion over a period of years. With respect to the distributors, they're going to pay those funds over 18 years. And with respect to Johnson & Johnson, it'll be over 9 years. Now, I want to point out that these aren't the only settlements that will arise out of this opioid litigation. I'm sure you're all aware that Purdue is in bankruptcy, and they've reached a tentative settlement agreement after some litigation and back and forth. And Attorney General Tong actually was very instrumental in that. But we don't have any numbers for that yet, and that's not been finally approved. And then there's other potential defendants like the pharmacies that we intend to add to this litigation So whatever money we're talking about here, we think there'll be quite a bit more as time goes on, as it should be, because they all were culpable in the opioid epidemic that all of our communities are experiencing. So let's talk about the settlement a little bit. Connecticut will get about 300 million roughly from that settlement. And it's generally based on population, and it's based on the opioid problems in communities. That's how that calculation was made. Those funds can be, under the settlement agreement, allocated in a number of different ways. And that was really the key. How do you divide the money among the towns and cities and the state? Both played significant roles in this litigation. And then again, and how do you do, I mean, and what we were just talking about, what was just mentioned, how do you make sure that these funds aren't diverted for other than opioid abatement purposes? Because that's really what the heart of this litigation was about. And I think we've accomplished that. There were three ways under the settlement agreement that these funds could be allocated. The first was through an agreement among the towns and cities, or between the towns and cities and the state, or through the adoption of legislation that would dictate how the funds would be allocated. That's what Connecticut chose to do. The third way was a default mechanism, and the only reason I mention that is that default mechanism is something that we looked at closely when we were working on the statute that was ultimately adopted in Connecticut. Now, we worked with Attorney General Tong on it, but I have to tell you, it was a heavy lift at times, because there were wanted to just grab all the money, and we managed to avoid that. So the way it works is the legislation provides that 85% of the funds that will be paid in will be paid into an abatement fund. 15%, the other 15% will be paid directly to the towns and cities over the period of time that I described earlier. And I think, and it's coming in dribs and drabs, unfortunately, that 15%. I think West Haven just probably recently received a check, or will receive a check, I guess, on the 29th for about $22,000, which is not much. But if you look at and I really haven't done the math, but if you look at the 15% over time, it becomes significant. I mean, I think West Haven, over the period of years I've described, will probably, $500,000 or $600,000 from that 15%. But the real money and the real importance of this is in the fund that'll be set up for opioid abatement. So initially, when the legislation was drafted, the state pretty much controlled that fund. They had set up a commission that would determine, based on application from towns and cities and communities and regions, and if that be the case, how those funds would be paid, and how much would be paid to the state and how much would be paid to the towns and cities. And we lobbied hard to have that changed. And now the commission is equally divided among the state and the towns and cities. Initially, there was a co-chairman, there was a chairman who was the commissioner of mental health and addiction services. And we lobbied again to make sure that there's co-chairs, one from the towns and cities and the commissioner of mental health and addiction services. So from that standpoint, we think what the final product is a good product, and it will get to the money will get to the towns and cities or the regions, as was not the case in the tobacco litigation. There have to be applications made. Some towns and cities within discussions will do things together. Some will do it on a regional basis. Some will have their own programs set up, and they'll make applications to the commission or the committee that's set up through this legislation. And they'll make a determination as to what they fund and don't fund. And as I said, the towns and cities will have 50% representation on that. At the end of every year, they'll have to indicating what they funded, how much is in, what's coming in, and there'll be a complete transparency, and they'll have to do an accounting. Likewise, those towns and cities and communities that receive funds will have to, at the end of the year, file a report indicating how the use of those funds, the effect of the use of those funds, and what programs have been set up. Now, when we talk about using the funds for abatement purposes, that's a pretty big umbrella. And the settlement agreement in Exhibit E of funds that, of ways these funds can be used. And I'll be happy to share that with you. You may already have it. I think we may have sent it out in the past, but we'll send it out again just so you can take a look at it. The statute is a little more general and talks in more general terms about how the funds will be used, but we believe the settlement agreement will be a guide for that. I think the committee will look to the settlement agreement. In fact, there's language in the statute that talks about that time and time again because it's a very, very comprehensive document. So that's kind of the general view of this. But let me see if there's some questions I've answered in that general view, but let me answer some other. I think we answered the first four questions that were sent to me. The fifth question is how long may we expect the program to last? I expect it to last until the funds have all been paid out by the defendants in this case, but it may be longer than the period I've described because, as I said, I think there'll be other defendants added to this. So we'll see what happens with the years to come. The sixth question I received is the news on this subject alludes to additional lawsuits in progress. Will they automatically be part of this settlement or will each lawsuit resolution create a separate structure? No, the statute provides that any other funds that come in from this opioid litigation will be under the statute and distributed according to the terms of the statute. By the way, that right now is Public Act 2248, if anyone wants to take a look at it. So I think we've put a structure in place now that will suffice as other settlements take place. The seventh question was, can we use the funds to make healthcare grants to affected individuals? You can, to the extent that you've made application to the committee and describe how those funds, you intend to use those funds. I mean, the committee will make a determination. And as I said before, the committee will be 50% towns and cities and 50% state. Can we use the funds to pay for first responder training, Narcan, et cetera? Yes, you can, definitely. Can we use the funds to pay for classroom education? Use the funds to make grants to professional organizations that serve this community, such as methadone clinics or behavioral health providers. You can, once again, though, that would be in your application to the committee. And if they approve it, that you can make those funds. It certainly falls within the umbrella I described before that's listed on Exhibit E of the settlement agreement. Can we use the fund for job creation that caters to the affected community, such as job training and skill building? Yes. Are we permitted to spend funds on legal fees and administrative expenses? That's an important question. When we first took a look at this legislation, it didn't provide any funds to the towns and cities to pay legal fees. And we recognized right away that was a problem because we have retainer agreements with you, we have retainer agreements with 30 plus other towns and cities. And that provides for a payment of, I think it's 30%. I'm not sure. But there's no money to pay us because the funds you're going to get, 15% is going to do it. And the restrictions on the use of abatement funds was going to not allow you to pay us. And so you would have had to pay us out of the general fund. And that wasn't going to fly. We knew that was not okay. So we lobbied the committee to allow towns and cities to make application to pay legal fees. And we'll represent to you now that we're not going to ask the town of West Haven or any other town to pay us anything out of the general fund. If you make application, we'd ask you to make application to the committee. If they say okay, fine, we'll get paid. If they don't say okay, we won't get paid. But we don't think it's fair to have to pay funds out of your general fund when you're not getting it from the proceeds of the litigation. So I hope that answers that question. Can we make a block grant to community foundation and delegate the administration of these funds? Once again, if that's in your application and the committee approves it, the answer would be yes. Are there any specific exclusions of expenditures in the settlement documents or the statutes? Well, the exclusions are that you can't use them for non-abatement purposes. Now, the 15% you get, by the way, it's preferred that you use that for abatement purposes, but you don't have to. But if you don't have to, you have to make a public filing as to what you used it for. So as you get to 15% over the years, for example, if you have local counsel who you want to review things, you could use that 15% to pay them. But you have to disclose it. Will we get any additional money from the state or only the rec fund manager payments? You will only get, I mean, I can't speak to what will take place with the other settlements and whether they'll have they'll have the same statutory structure. I don't know whether the 15% that you get from this settlement will be replicated in other settlements. I can't tell you if that'll take place or not. And I already described it. There's a question about how our law firms pay it. I already described that. The current fee, one is the same. You'll have our support as long as this is going forward, because it's complicated, and we're happy to answer any questions and give you advice if necessary. And also, there's going to be communication. The pharmacies need to be brought into this case and need to pay a significant amount of money. They knew, yes. Was that the?
Will your services continue? Can you just repeat the question and answer?
Sure. What support can we expect from your firm under the current fee arrangement? When does this end? What I said was, we're here for you as long as this settlement process is going forward. You can always call us with questions. You can always ask us to attend a meeting by Zoom or in person. We're happy to do that. This is a big deal. We want to make sure that it's handled well. And when will it end? I don't know. As I was saying, there's other litigation that's proceeding and going to take place. And for example, the pharmacies they should and they probably will pay a large amount of funds. They were just as the distribution of the RV. We remain available after the settlement. I think the settlement's going to be a long time. If I'm still around, I'll be available for legal advice. I'm happy to do that. And is your firm available to hire? Should we need more support past your current engagement? Yes, of course. Will funds dispersed to an individual, say for rehab treatment, be taxable? Generally, settlement funds aren't taxable, so I don't. Finally, the city of West Haven is under MARB Tier 4 fiscal control at the moment. Do they have any say or role in this process? I'm not familiar with the strictures with respect to that, so I really can't give you an answer. I don't know. I recall when Waterbury was under a similar situation, they were looking their operations, had some control but not complete control. So I don't know if that's the case in your state. But those are the questions that were submitted to me. If you have other questions at that time, we've got plenty of time, so we're happy to go through.
Thank you, Mr. Hartley. I submitted those questions, so I just wanted them to have them ahead of time because I didn't know how long they would take. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Hartley or Mr. Wellman? I see none.
Thank you, Mr. Hickman.
Mr. Hartley, we don't have any more questions for you, so thank you for your time. Sorry, my neck is killing me looking backwards, so thank you.
Okay, well, thank you and good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you. We are now in recess.
No,
6:55, right?
yeah, no, we have to close out this whole meeting
Oh,
to start the new one.
so how do I?
So, we need If no one else has any questions, we're gonna do a motion to
Oh.
adjourn.
I need no more questions, I need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So, all approve? We are now in recess.
Nope.